organized in Parliament. You have that story on page 4 and 5 of the Star this morning. Khalwale drops bid for Malala as Karua joins Azimio is another story that you have there. And you can see down here as well is all aboard Azimio la Umoja presidential candidate Raila Odinga na Kenya leader Martha Karua during a press briefing in Nairobi yesterday. That story continues on page 6. Obado signed generated false medical forms, and our baby's birth months affect malaria likelihood. You have the story on page 3 of the Star this morning. Former Mandera driver jailed for life over abduction of Cuban doctors. You can follow that story on page 9 of the Star this morning. We can buckle down to business and see what we have on the front page of the Business Daily. Kenyatta's Equity CEO Ndegwa's get 1 billion shillings dividend. It's a boom there. Banking investors pocket record dividends after most lenders triple digit profit growth. Buying stocks at Nairobi bounce. You can follow the story on page 4 of the Business Daily. MPs recall 500 million shillings for vaccine plant setup is another story that you can follow on page 2 of the Business Daily. And women's favorite brands. This is a standalone picture there. Safaricom team of Fauzia Ali, Juliet Kaleche, Paris Nduta, and Millicent Okello receiving their prize from Public Service and Gender Chief Administrative Secretary Rachel Shebesh after the company was named the most loved brand by women during the release of the top 100 most loved brands by women in Kenya 2022 study rankings in that is on Wednesday evening. They're flanked by BSD Group CEO Eva Muraya and Ipsos country manager Chris Kidaiga there. You can follow the story on page 16 of the Business Daily this morning. Treasury revives cooking gas subsidy plan. Treasury revives cooking gas subsidy plan is another story that you want to follow on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. The Treasury has announced plans to revive the stalled subsidy scheme for affordable cooking gas from July. That story continues on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. I have also the Taifa Leo finally, and as we wind up on that, Karua aingia boxi. It says Karua aingia boxi. Kinara wa NAK Kenya hatimaye atangaza kumuunga mkono Raila Odinga siku moja baada ya kusema Oka imekufa. That is what the flag is reading on top there. And you can see also this related picture there. Baada ya kipindi kirefu cha kutojulikana mrengo anaoegemea, hatimaye kiongozi wa NAK Kenya Martha Karua amejiunga na Azimio la Umoja na kutangaza atampigia debe Raila Odinga katika kinyang'anyiro cha urais Agosti 9. That story continues on page 2 of Taifa Leo this morning. And those are your dailies. And I'll just pick a keen interest in what is on the front page of the Business Daily, because today we're discussing matters economy. And we want to look at the cooking gas subsidy plan from Treasury right now. The Treasury has announced plans to revive the stalled subsidy scheme for the affordable cooking gas from July, promising relief to families hit by record LPG prices spikes following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And allow me just to engage our guests on this as well. We begin with Kiprono Kitoni on this particular subsidy on cooking gas. Right now we're feeling the impact of Russia-Ukraine war. People, of course, are smarting from what is affecting the supply chain, especially when it comes to oil. We know the crude oil, a barrel has been going up upwards $1. I think the last time we checked it was over 100. I don't know right now what actually the price per barrel is, and that is affecting even, of course, the wheat imports here in the country. Russia is a big exporter, and Ukraine is a big exporter of wheat. What is the current state of play from your own assessment, and especially looking also at the securities markets?
I think that there's many things that one could look at, many perspectives one could look at this problem, especially the war in the Ukraine and Russia.
Yes.
But certain short-term, medium-term impact will be great inflation and pressure on the economy, global economy. I mean, if we look today at fertilizer, for example, it is 100% higher than it was last year.
Yes.
And I think that presented itself a major crisis from an agricultural perspective, because many farmers are unable to cultivate their farms because they cannot afford the base raw materials. Secondly, that now will speak to the cost of food. At the end of this year, what's the price of unga going to be, for example? I mean, we've seen a very direct consequences it has had on petroleum, fossil fuel prices. The prices, the effect it's had on gas prices, like we just talked about a few minutes ago. And I think, for me, the world has to brace itself for some very serious turbulence from an inflationary perspective. And in Kenya, that will be a big challenge for the new administration, because they'll be taking over at a time when all these things will be sort of crystallizing. Yes.
So we're just still smarting from COVID-19 pandemic effects. Right now, the other shoe has dropped, which is the Russian-Ukrainian war.
Yes.
Let's hear from Professor Collins Odote. Good morning.
Good morning, Dibal. When I was last in the show, I think around 4 weeks ago, then the fighting in Ukraine had just started. And there was a heated debate amongst panelists as to what the effect will be on Kenya. And I think a few people were making the point that the effect will not be direct. 4 weeks later, it is now clear they were wrong. And that's the beauty of time. Time is able to confirm things. They were completely wrong, because, as Kiprono says, if you can already see, the petroleum prices is being affected directly. I think because of Russia's place in terms of the quantity of oil that it produces across the country. And that's going to have a huge impact. Anytime there is turbulence in oil prices, it affects the economy immediately and for a long time. Because petrol is a prerequisite for many things. It affects transport, it affects cooking, it affects manufacturing. So that's going to have a huge effect. The second is wheat and Ukraine. And Kenya and wheat production is also a critical issue. And that again is going to affect us. I think the third thing is what you've just said, Dibal, is that this crisis is coming hot on the heels of another. It's just 2 weeks ago when CS Mutahi Kagwe said we are now relaxing the COVID-19 protocols. And one would hope that we are now moving towards economic recovery. But lo and behold, just when you're saying let's start economic recovery measures, you still must then deal with the practical consequences of the fight in Ukraine. I think lastly for me, Dibal, I think watching TV last night or 2 days ago and watching the amounts of displacement that is taking place, the amount of refugees, the amount of Ukrainians that are having to move out of their countries. But even for us as a country, over the last few days, the question about our people who have to be evacuated back to Kenya, because there are Kenyans also in Ukraine. So if you take all that together, I think there's going to be both an economic but also a social crisis that we'll have to deal with as a country in terms of the impact of the war in Ukraine. And the other thing it does, it dents international relations. I think for a long time, international relations has the role of the international community in trying to deal with things has been reducing because of increase in nationalism. I think this effect of the war in Ukraine again tests international relations, again tests the place of the UN, and again tests the question as to whether we are not moving back to looking at ourselves more inward as opposed to more outward. I think those are things that concern both from a political perspective but also from an economic perspective.
Right, but when we talk about the subsidy, I think this is not really stimulated by the war in Ukraine, because we had the ministry talking about the cooking gas subsidy way back. When we remember also they were trying to introduce the reticulated gas to some of the houses, and then that particular plan was shelved as well. This was also in tandem with the subsidy. Yeah. So has this particular Ukrainian war now brought that particular conversation on the table?
You know, the reality, Dibal, is that the small-scale person, your ordinary family, has been suffering economically, and that's why the subsidy was being brought in to try and cushion them against the effects of the turbulence in terms of prices. You know, the Electricity Regulatory Commission, ERC, was supposed to be helping us to ensure that we have a much more stable pricing. We haven't had that for quite some time. The war in Ukraine is not the reason why it's coming back on the table, but it heightens the urgency of that conversation, because people are suffering already anyway. Now, if you add on to this new impact, it just means that we need to do something in terms of cushioning the ordinary person, because if we don't do so, the impact is going to be great. And as Kiprono says, I think it's 5 months to an election. Whoever takes over in August is going to take over when the rhetoric ends with a huge economic challenge. A huge economic challenge that, if you remember John Michuki's many years conversation of juggling the role lever, this is going to be worse than juggling the role lever. And I think it's going to require a lot of innovation to just stable the Kenyan economic ship.
Right, thank you. Well, let me try and rope in also Bill Okero, businessman, former senator also of Mandera, and the chair of the Finance Committee in the Senate. Good morning, good to see you. We actually were looking at the dailies as well, and just talking about the repercussions right now that we are facing here in the country in regard to the prices of LPG, that is the cooking gas. But now at least there is relief from Treasury, who are coming up with a subsidy. But if you may recall also, there were conversations on how the government is trying to introduce reticulated gas to the households, having a pilot phase here in Nairobi, as it were, and also this subsidy was part of that particular package that was shelved. Do you think that this should have happened way before now this Russian-Ukrainian war has erupted? Good morning.
Morning. Thank you very much. I think this issue has been long overdue. We've had discussions on this way back, and there's no doubt that the government has looked at the possibility of moving, not the possibility, but actually moving away from our traditional wood and charcoal and those things to gas for a long time because of environmental issues. But I think it's time that the government took advantage. Even today with this crisis, the government should take advantage of government-to-government oil or petroleum or gas-related procurements. I think this is critical, and a number of countries are already considering this. In Kenya, for a long time, that issue has been fraught with questions of integrity. But I think for a developing country like ours, with challenges of resources and debt and all that, I think it's important that the government must consider that. Having said that, however, I think the government's decision now to provide this subsidy is welcome. Gas has really been priced out for many people today. It's just like any other of the petroleum related products. So I think it's very important that the government goes ahead with that subsidy, because it is vital today, and for the challenges that my colleagues have mentioned, which we are facing in the few months to come if this war continues.
Thank you very much. All right, let's just move on. We want now to focus on the story that also has been doing headlines as far as the Safaricom is concerned, and the unbundling of Safaricom from the M-Pesa. We know the central bank is in talks with telecom company Safaricom about separating M-Pesa to run as a standalone entity. And this means that Safaricom could soon separate M-Pesa from its mobile and data business in a move that will significantly disrupt East Africa's most profitable company and the region's telecommunications industry. CBK is pushing to have telecommunications service providers hive off their mobile money businesses to improve regulations and customer protection. CBK Governor Patrick Njoroge says the mobile wallet is equivalent to the 14th largest commercial bank. According to Safaricom, the move, which has no timetable yet, is a part of a bigger process that needs regulatory approval. Njoroge was giving his submissions to the Senate Committee on Information and Technology, which is probing alleged monopolistic practices by Safaricom. According to CBK, telcos will be expected to adopt a structure similar to that of commercial banks, where the group forms an umbrella entity with other businesses like voice, data and mobile money listed as subsidiaries. So truly, what does this really portend? And this has been a very long, protracted debate that Competition Authority has been involved before. We had also Telecom Kenya really raising issues of the monopolistic nature of Safaricom and the dominance of Safaricom. Airtel also has been on that particular table. Remember, there was also that speculation that Telecom will be merging with Airtel at the end of the day, and that particular conversation also tapered off and disappeared completely. But now here we are again, the regulator is coming to the fore, and analysts have been questioning the role of a regulator in terms of now pushing this particular wage between Safaricom and M-Pesa. Is it supposed to be, of course, regulating or sort of also driving the wage in the businesses? And if you are successful as a business at the end of the day, should you be punished, so to speak, as people were saying, that you have to unbundle some of your business segment as well? Let's just hear from Kiprono Kitoni. Looking at this development, of course, Safaricom is listed at the NSE. What do you think, and how is this going to, does it portend for Safaricom, as it were?
Debal, I happen to be a close business partner of Safaricom. I've been one of their distributors since they first opened business in 2000.
Yes.
And Safaricom is and has been an incredible success story. A success story that should be replicated by other enterprises in this country. Safaricom is regulated by two regulators, that is the Central Bank of Kenya and the Communications Authority of Kenya. And looking at the success of Safaricom over the recent past, I mean, it has been a company which has been highly innovative, and we have noted last week that the Central Bank of Kenya is pushing for an unbundling of M-Pesa from Safaricom's core business. Mm-hmm. My position is that that may be a positive step, because it might also help to de-risk the two businesses. Mm-hmm. M-Pesa has proven itself to be a major transactional channel for this country. In fact, about 1/3 of our GDP is transacted by M-Pesa. Mm-hmm. However, having said that, I think it needs to be handled with great care. And it mustn't be seen that Safaricom is being punished for its own success. But from a market point of view, I think having M-Pesa as a separate, standalone enterprise from the main core business of Safaricom might be a good thing even for the market. Then we now have two companies that are, significantly successful. Mm-hmm. And separation will also de-risk the businesses and enhance their growth. Mm-hmm. So for me, given the enormity of Safaricom, which actually currently occupies about 50% of total market capitalization on the stock exchange, mm-hmm. I favor the idea that we should perhaps have two entities, that is M-Pesa and Safaricom, operating separately. But this needs to be handled with the greatest of care, mm-hmm. not to tamper with the golden goose.
All right, and what will be the golden rules?
I mean, the company itself is been highly successful in its current formation. So even if it was to be unbundled, it must be a process as opposed to an event. It's not a light switch that you can turn off and on and say, fine, let's split this. It's a piece of meat, so let's just cut it into two, and both pieces will be palatable. So I think it needs to be handled with great care, and I think the management and the stakeholders of Safaricom need to be onboarded into this idea. But I think in the longer term, it is certainly in the interests of all if these two entities could be separated.
Right.
M-Pesa, under M-Pesa Africa, led by Sitoyo Lopokoit, is actually leading a charge now across the continent in taking M-Pesa services across the continent. So really, they have the wherewithal and the resources to become a major player across the continent, and perhaps even globally.
CBK, has been watching from the periphery when we had all this tug of war between Telcom and Safaricom and Airtel, and the competition authority was now actually trying to intervene at the end of the day. So why are they providentially coming into play right now? Why now? People will ask, why now, CBK?
Debal, I was in the room in 2007 when M-Pesa was launched, and many people were skeptical. They thought, this is just a nuisance, yet another service that they would like, for example, us as the resellers to go and partake in. Little did we know that it was going to actually have a major effect on the way that we live and the way that we transact. Mm-hmm. I think literally everybody in this room today can say that they will conduct some of their transactions in the course of this day on M-Pesa. So M-Pesa, as a standalone technology and as a transactional enabler, has come of age. And M-Pesa today, even if you look and do a breakout of the financials of Safaricom, M-Pesa is a big contributor. However, Safaricom continues to be a dominant player in the provision of fixed data, in the provision of voice, and in the provision of many other services. In fact, right now, they are leading the charge on the Internet of Things. So I believe that there's enough business and enough commercial value proposition in Safaricom in its current formation. But M-Pesa alone is a huge and significant emerging business that could be really listed on its own.
But even maybe just broadening the discussion a bit, the enormous power that Safaricom now is holding in terms of just the running of affairs of this country and that monopolistic nature that we're talking about, it could be also, so to speak, a threat. We've seen when M-Pesa grounds to a halt, the way things are affected here in the country, people cannot transact. So in a way, it could hold many to ransom if Safaricom has that particular power. Could we just maybe broaden the discussion to that particular arena where we're talking about even security?
Actually, if you look at the front page of the Nation today, you will see, not the front page, the back page of the Nation.
Of the Nation, yes.
You will see that the debate before the Senate is actually wider than unbundling of Safaricom and M-Pesa.
Yes, Safaricom faces 3 billion loss in tariff review.
And it's talking about the mobile transfer rates between Safaricom and the other countries. And I think it goes to the same point you're making. And the same point you're making is, number one, what is the current status of Safaricom as a company? And what is our response as a country? And I think Kiprono is right on one side of the equation, which is about the success of Safaricom. On the other side, I think the debate is about the dominant nature of Safaricom and some of the challenges that provides. I think the question we must ask ourselves, how do we deal with those two sides of the same equation? How do we deal with success and how do we deal with dominance? In my view, I think whichever way we go about it, we must be able to address the dominance, but do so in a manner that's not punishing the successful person. And I think that's the larger message that should be being sent. Because the reality, Dibal, if we go back to M-Pesa, it is not the mistake of M-Pesa. It is the mistake of regulation. Because regulation has been behind technology and innovation. So what should be happening is to say, we want to catch up with what is happening from a technological point of view. That when this thing started, we thought it was just an experiment. It didn't look too big. But at some point in time, I think around 3 years ago, there was already admission in the country that, you know, M-Pesa is bigger than any other bank in this country. Yet it is unregulated. It is unregulated not because they are avoiding regulation, but because there's a regulatory gap. There was a regulatory gap. So if we are trying to now create a regulatory framework to govern what is happening within M-Pesa, including unbundling, I think it's a useful thing, but it should not be done in a manner that says, you have made a mistake, you are a criminal, because I think that's wrong. I think what we should be actually doing is to ask ourselves, how do we promote many more other companies to be as successful as Safaricom? Because that's the only way you can be able to grow this economy. Having said so, I think the conversations about separating the two companies, the two elements of it in terms of the provision of data and voice vis-a-vis the money transfer aspect, which is M-Pesa, is a useful thing. But the second more useful thing is what you've raised. Is that important for us to ask ourselves, moving into the future, how do we ensure that as companies become successful, they do not veer into the era of being monopolistic? Because when they are monopolistic, yes, the ordinary person will see the success, but the legal implications of that success in terms of monopoly, in terms of then making it more difficult for other people to succeed, would then come. And if you look at the back page of the Nation, the back page of the Nation is admitting, again from the ministry itself, that, you know, we reviewed this last year and we found out that, look, the amount of money that they were charging is way too much. In fact, that they were getting billions, if I get it right. They were receiving 3.5 billion, yet they should have been receiving 1 or 6 million. Who do we blame for that? Is it Safaricom? No, I don't blame Safaricom. I blame the regulator in terms of not doing a good job. And I think if we're trying to correct some of the lapses that have existed, let's do so. But let's do so in a manner that, in my view, does not send the wrong message to the business person that, you know, our regulatory approach is one of a hammer. That we're looking for Kiprono. Anytime Kiprono is successful, how do we bring you down? But it must be a regulator's approach which is facilitative and also equitable.
All right, let's hear from also Bill Okero on this particular development as well. Your turn of thoughts?
Yeah, Dibala, I think of course, I agree with the gentleman that Safaricom, and specifically the M-Pesa, is a global leader in fintech. I mean, it's that success is recognized in the whole world, that really they are pioneers in this. And one of the things that I see is that there is the hidden hand of the commercial banks in the CBK governor's remarks lately. And clearly the reason is the M-Pesa has taken quite a chunk of the business that commercial banks have always done. When was the last time you or me or any of us has gone to the bank to draw cash or used your credit card, or transferred money? Nowadays, all these things we do through M-Pesa, literally. And so there are a lot of things that needs to be considered. And one of the things, the challenges I want to, tell the central bank governor is that there has to be, and I agree with my colleagues, that there has to be public participation, serious public participation in this matter, because this mobile money has succeeded in many ways, not just the innovative aspect of it that has been mentioned by Kiprono, but I think in deepening the financial inclusivity in this country. I mean, all over the country today, you can talk about everyone literally has an opportunity to transfer money or receive money wherever they are in the remotest places in this country. They have also enhanced efficiency. Really, and I think many of these other institutions now around the mobile money have taken advantage of the mobiles, of this M-Pesa successes to develop very innovative and very efficient, transactions, financial transactions that have helped businesses and individuals. So I think there's no difficulty, and I don't think there's any challenge or any opposition to the businesses running separately, M-Pesa on a different platform, a different entity altogether. I agree with Kiprona that's fine. But I think the issue is the attempt to regulate. Already is regulated by CBK and is already regulated by CCK. I don't think that is the issue. The issue is, what is the end game? What exactly does the government want from M-Pesa? I mean, every business in this world has risks. Commercial banks have risks. Commercial banks, you remember when the banking sector collapsed in America in 2008 in the Wall Street. So there is no enterprise, no business that is free from risks. So we cannot look at M-Pesa and say, what if it's 60–70% of the country is tied to M-Pesa, and so what happens if it grinds to a halt? I mean, it has been there for the last more than a decade now, and so far it's been growing. And I think Safaricom has a challenge. I remember Michael Joseph used to say that he used to blame the queue habits. He used to say the Kenyans are queue people, because he does not understand why everybody wants to be on Safaricom. And I remember when the competitors tried to reduce their rates to even 0 or even a shilling when Safaricom was at 4 shillings or 5 shillings, but people were still stuck with Safaricom, and he used to be surprised why he would. So I think, yes, there is monopoly needs to be controlled in terms of pricing. They have products and so forth, as is being mentioned today in the papers. But I think the success of this institution should be looked at from the point of view of the benefits to the public in Kenya, to the businesses, to the individuals across the country. Kenyans are really way advanced in terms of financial inclusivity, in terms of efficiency in money, financial transactions, because of M-Pesa today. Wherever you are in the world, if you have an M-Pesa account today, you can be in London and still make your payments, still make your transfer to anywhere in this country without. So I think the government needs to focus not just on regulation, but the government needs to focus on facilitating business. It's one of the weaknesses of central bank. Central bank has become a tool for the commercial banks, nothing else. Their interest is the interest of the commercial banks. They no longer look at the interest of businesses. They don't look at facilitating business. And I think that is a critical thing that all our institutions, KRA, CBK, and all these institutions, regulators need to look at. That there is one aspect that is regulation, but there is also the need to enhance and facilitate business so that institutions grow and the economy grows, and you enable an appropriate business environment. And I think this is, for me, that is the most important thing.
Kiprono, you wanted to say something?
Please. I couldn't agree more with Bill Okero. One of the enduring legacies of President Kenyatta is the economic diplomacy that he's done, opening doors and markets to Kenya and vice versa. And I think for me, we need to start to ask ourselves, dominant where? I mean, what I would like to see myself is a Safaricom and an M-Pesa that is not just dominant in Kenya. We need a company that is dominant across our continent and perhaps even to go further afield. We've seen South African companies that have worked very aggressively to create a footprint across the continent. We've seen Dr. Mwangi of Equity Bank. I'm a great admirer of James Mwangi because he's had the courage to take his bank to many other countries, and he's being successful in those countries as well. He's had his fair share of challenges, but he's continuing to lead the charge of Kenyan enterprise across the continent of Africa. And I think for me, we really need to challenge a company like Safaricom to actually go out there like they've done in Ethiopia, establish the same and prove themselves to be capable of deploying the same commercial success across other platforms, jurisdictionally.
So do you think also this particular unbundling will affect the entry into Ethiopia, as it were?
I think M-Pesa, for one, is a no-brainer. I mean, in any country that will allow M-Pesa to be embraced into its economic infrastructure, it will be a no-brainer that will be successful. In many countries, again, like I say, I'll use South Africa as an example. We know that the South African commercial banks are very, very strong, and they are sort of a bulwark against introduction of new technology to compete with the services that they offer. That is why there is no M-Pesa in South Africa. But I think that there are still many opportunities. The continent's got almost 50-something countries. Really, we need to encourage this company to go out there, lead the charge, and develop the same commercial success.
All right, let's hear from Professor Kolsodo.
3 things, and let me start with the last one, where you ask, will unbundling affect its entry into Ethiopia? It shouldn't. The reason why it shouldn't is that the unbundling should not be about punishing it. The unbundling must be about ensuring that as it operates more efficiently and it competes more fairly. So it's not about, in my view, and should not be about now punishing M-Pesa and making M-Pesa less successful. Just saying that this company doing the 2 things becomes too big, and in terms of the competition, it might be seen to be a monopoly. So let's separate the 2 of them so that the focus on their coefficient. That should still make it possible, because you can have a holding company, make it possible for you to be able to do the 2 business. So that should be the focus. But the second, and I think I wanted to just respond to what Bill Okero said. I think it's important that CBK moves away from the traditional approach of regulation. A traditional approach of regulation which focuses on we want to close, we want to stop. That cannot be. The approach in the new era must be one that recognizes that we want to facilitate and we want to ensure that innovation is celebrated. And I think that's a critical issue. Because if you look at it in reality, around 5 years ago, if you went to the West, everybody would be using a credit card. You would be going, I remember going to some place in Germany, I think around 7 years ago, and I'd changed my money into euros. So I was carrying 1,500 euros, and everybody was saying, are you mad? Why are you carrying this amount of money? You guys are so rich. And I was like, what do you mean? It is the normal business. Because here, you knew that your money was in cash. You always carried a wallet. Then first come COVID. After COVID, you now can walk for a month without your wallet. You don't need it. In fact, the last time I was looking for my wallet 2 days ago, and I had to ask my wife, where is my wallet? Because in reality, your wallet is your phone. Because of COVID, everybody moved cashless, from the mama mboga to the business mogul. So I think if we look at, and that's because of Safaricom, the day that technology is disrupted, for those 2 hours, everybody will be suffering. Where do I get money? There are times you go, and if your M-Pesa is not working, you're like, I don't have cash on me. So as opposed to a focus that seeks to dent that kind of innovation, both from CBK to our members of parliament who are discussing it, to all of us, I think we must be discussing it in a manner that we celebrate and a manner that we enhance its growth. We should all be excited, Debal, when Safaricom goes to Ethiopia. In the past, we've been used to companies from South Africa coming here, and we complain and say they're taking over our business. Now we have businesses that are essentially located in Kenya moving out. We have Safaricom, we have Equity, and we have Kenya Commercial Bank. Our responsibility as a country must be to ensure that the business environment is one that supports them. But secondly, must be to ensure that the Kenyan public are excited about their success, because that success is not just a success for the companies, it's a success for the country, because it gives the country a good name, both in terms of diplomacy, but also in terms of tourism, and even in terms of even just the pride that it gives the country. That's the kind of, that, for me, that should be the role of every regulator, and that should be the role of the law, to ensure that that success is celebrated and that success is sustained within a context.
Right. We want to take a short break right now, but of course also the question that will come to the fore is, we know CBK is trying to roll out the digital currency, and it's heavily reliant on the 3G, 4G network, as it were, at the end of the day. So are we caught up actually in a catch-22 that CBK is reliant on this 4G network, which is, of course, right up the alley of the telcos, as it were, Safaricom being one of them at the end of the day. So how will that really pan out? Will it also get affected at the end of the day? So this is a question that we'll be probing on the other side of the break. You're watching Sokoni here on Morning Prime. Don't go away. Much more on the other side of the break.